All right, let's talk a little bit about our lovely thing over here.
I didn't do this one, but sure. I have.
You read it.
What?
What was our question again? So, how do they use literary elements and techniques to convey the complex nature of their relationship?
Let me look at my response.
Can I? Oh well, okay. I don't. There's just one point I really want to say that like I've read this thing only like twice. I did the other essay because I overslept, but or I didn't oversleep. I was here on time, and then when I started writing the essay, I fell asleep.
Oh my gosh, Michael, it doesn't matter. Go ahead, just tell us.
Okay. So can I say my point, or like do we have to like go in order of like where we would start with the essay or no?
Just whatever. Go ahead.
So, I like how like throughout the entire thing, it's talking about not Hector, Andre. He's like it compares him to a woman in multiple like phrases, and he's very like high. He's very high in regard, kind of angelic. He's seen as a very near perfect person by the terms it uses to describe him. And then
Yeah,
at the very end, his entire monologue is how he's basically going to turn into a demon and just haunt this guy forever because he's spiteful. And it like fully contrasts with like the rest of the essay where he just seems like this picked on person because he got slapped over just some girl. So it's like you don't really want to sympathize with him because like it's unreasonable to hit the guy over just a girl, but that you met in one night. At the same time, this guy's like fully threatening his entire existence for when he dies, just because he got hit once, which is not right, and it doesn't fit with the whole description of like how he's supposed to be this super amazing person. So I just think it's like a heavy contrast, and then it's not really until the end that you realize he's kind of just being a really mean person to Hector because he's saying like I'm gonna haunt you, I'll make sure your life whenever it's going good, I'm right there to ruin it, everything like that. And that sorry, I'm like repeating the same thing, but you get what I mean, right?
Yeah.
I think so.
I don't know, like okay, I didn't write an essay, so I don't like have the time to properly like develop my ideas, but that's like one of the first things I noticed after I just reread it is like it's just for the super angelic person to go on and say that it portrays like he's actually not as good as the passage initially makes him seem. So that's my first point. I don't know if it's a good one or anything, but it's just I don't know. It's an idea.
Okay, sorry, hold on. Somebody was calling.
It's so good. My
So
dog.
it turned my
out.
broadcast off.
Oh,
Is everyone able to see the text over here this time?
Yeah. I saw it before, so
I saw before. Now I don't.
Well, I had to pull it back up because it was. All right. So what other thoughts do you have?
uh I just thought, part of the relationship comes from or stems from like the societal expectations of like women and like how like I don't know, they're kind of just like prizes or like kind of things that we can just pick and choose rather than like actually like forming an actual relationship with them. It's just like, oh, pretty woman, I want it. Yeah. The battle
Yes,
is
I don't disagree with you, but I do think that he does lay some blame on the woman's part too.
because they look so
It's
pretty.
kind of like it's your fault that we kind of fell off. Because it seems like they were like decently friends or like family, and then it's just like this, like, woman kind of came into the midst and they both kind of fought over her, and it ended up just like kind of shattering their relationship.
Right.
I
Well, I
think it was
say
a
in
lot
this.
just like blame on both sides. They just both kind of blamed each other, and then it just kind of got worse and worse and worse.
Well, no, I mean, one thing that's a little hard about this passage is I think certain things are not super clear. It doesn't. We don't hear. We don't hear much about what Andre thinks of Hector. Is it Hector? Is that his name?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because almost all of this is from Hector's
Perspective.
his perspective and a future perspective looking back. Like we know that, right? Like we know this is him in the future.
Oh, yeah, they talk about past tense. So.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's talking about everything in the fast tense. He also makes that point about. Did I highlight it up here? Yeah, so the end of what I had not yet learned to despise myself for that brutal outrage, right? The eastern sun shone in the face presently and dyed the cruel mark with a deeper red, but to sting of my own wrongs was fresh. So like in his future date for sure, we know that like he feels he was in the wrong.
Yeah.
Like for it's like he despises himself for the fact that he had hit him to begin with, and then certainly for having killed him.
Wait. You killed him?
Yes, I.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we
I
thought
wounded
I wounded
him
him mortally. I'm retarded.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Sorry.
saying. Like, so, like, yeah, right. We thought I wounded him mortally, right? And then life had been very sweet to him, which is another contrast in their
Yeah.
relationship,
Yeah.
by the way.
About that.
Oh.
Because Hector's constantly talking about how terrible his life is. Now, again, you got to be a little careful because, like, was his life actually that bad? Like, he
No.
clearly, like, looked up to Andre, and he probably cared about him, but he also seemed to be jealous of him. And
Yeah.
that jealousy is probably what ultimately, like, the jealousy is probably what ultimately caused him to lash out this way.
He was next in line for something, right? To inherit like a place of power.
Well, right. And that's also where we talk about, well, was it Ethan earlier? Somebody was all talking about society in terms of women. I think society in terms of the fact that these guys were
Wealthy.
wealthy, but also like forms of nobility,
Oh.
like plays into some of the difficulties that they're having. That adds the level. You know, they're not just cousins; they are cousins, but
Yeah, they have position.
you have one cousin who has higher position than the other one, and that's just always going to be hanging over their heads, and it's not really possible to just have this regular loving familial relationship because there's also this title that goes along with it.
Oh, and as for I didn't notice that earlier because I think when you scrolled down, I accidentally skipped over that entire like paragraph.
Well, and I think this frenzy of despair that took possession over of him is important here as well. So that would be the only pushback I would have against what you said earlier about how this kind of proves that he's terrible. A lot of what he's saying here, he's saying while he's freaking out and dying.
Spare the moment.
Right. So we don't know because he's dead. Would he feel similar regret to what Hector feels all these years later, looking back and go, you know, I wish I hadn't said that. Or maybe he was this terrible person or whatever, and this revealed who he actually was.
I'll admit, when I was calling him terrible, I like skimmed over I guess the part where he was dying. So I thought he just got slapped or something, and he was saying all this stuff, and I was like, that's a bit of an overreaction. I didn't know he was like,
no, this is like when he's actually dying. Another thing's
yeah.
interesting. I'm curious how what the passage is all about. You know, he's saying like kind of literally like what? I'm not one who believes that a man is done with earth because his eyes is glazed, right? So he's basically saying like my body might be dying, but my soul ain't going anywhere. I'm going to like literally haunt you and make your life miserable. But even if he was wrong about that, I think it's clear from the whole passage. Like you look at the descriptive words, you look at the way he's talking about it, that this event has haunted him. And even if
Oh.
Andre has not literally been haunting him, which I don't know what kind of short story this is. Maybe this is a short story with like hauntings. It kind of doesn't matter. We do know that he has been haunted by this event, and it has affected him. Like if you look at the types of stuff that he's talking about, right? What does he say? I, with this ugly scar upon my face that women have praised and loved, I will come to you when your life seems the brightest. I will come between you and all that you hold dearest and fairest. I said that backwards, but whatever. My ghostly hand shall drop a poison in your cup of joy, right? Poison in your cup of joy. My shadowy form shall shut the sunlight from your life. Men with such iron will as mine can do what they please. That's just kind of more of it. If you think about it, like, and granted, we don't technically have text evidence for this. Some of this is stuff that you almost just have to sort of think through what his life is like. It's very likely that whenever he's having his best days, whenever his like best and brightest days are coming back, this memory of this thing that he has done is coming back and bringing sorrow within that joy. He might be able to not have strong relationships between people, especially since it was a woman, right, that caused and he at least partially blames the woman for the fight back here. So maybe his ability to have relationships with women are messed up now because, you know, it was a woman that caused me to do this terrible thing. So the guilt has certainly haunted him, even if the physical ghost hasn't. So in this case, I think and even myself for a second, I was a little bit when I was reading through this. So a lot of times when it talks about the complex relationship they have, I think the word nature here matters a little bit. Because I don't know that it's just their relationship that's super complex so much as the complexity comes from some of those things we've been talking about. The societal expectations on them both, the fighting over women, but still like potentially caring about them. Hector's looking up to Andre, but also pretty clearly being jealous of him. Hector like seeing Andre as kind of this like picture of greatness, and then by contrast seeing himself like, so almost all of the descriptions of Andre were very positive, and all the descriptions of himself were very negative, and I think that's part of their relationship. I don't think those two things, I don't think that we can just go, oh, Hector must have been really ugly and unsuccessful and Andre must have been attractive and successful. I think these two things are connected, right? He sees Andre as like the epitome of attractiveness and success. So then in comparison, he sees himself as very low, right? And so that's all part. So like the way he views himself is part of their relationship. So again, I think that's sort of the complexity you would try to deal with. I do think this was a pretty difficult passage to write over. Not necessarily a terrible, difficult passage to understand, but to really draw out the complexity, I think it was difficult in this one.
Yeah.
The other one wasn't even complex, which sucked. But
well, but I mean, I kind of picked these on purpose because I did that last one first because I think there is a good chance that they'll pick a more modern text. So I picked that one because it was relatively new. And I picked this one this week so you could have another practice with a little bit older text. I would be surprised if they do anything older than this. Like this was like 19th century. Like, so this was like the 1800s, 1867. I would be surprised if they do anything. I doubt they're going to do like 17th or 18th century. I don't think they're going to do that. They could, though. I mean, you got to be prepared for anything. If they do, I will say this: if they do give you a passage that is like 17th century, so it's like Shakespearean era, where you've got the these and the thous and the difficult to read language, they are going to be asking you a little bit more straightforward question there. Like the question's not going to be as deep. So it is going to be more about, do I actually kind of understand the connections that are being made here? They won't expect you to dive as deep. Whereas if the passage is really simple to read and straightforward, then they're looking for you to notice things that not everyone else is going to notice. So don't just talk about the obvious, clear stuff. It doesn't mean you ignore obvious and clear stuff, because that's part of your evidence that you build to go deeper. But your claims and stuff need to be beyond just the straightforward, this is what the text says.
So, what were some good literary techniques for this passage?
Um,
Because I used metaphors, personification, and imagery.
Yeah, imagery is definitely probably the most noticeable one. Like when you read through, he talks about that. There was also pretty clearly personification, right? The August morning wind blowing in my face. Yeah, the chill breath. There you go. I was like, wind blowing isn't personification, but the fact that it's the breath of that August morning blowing gives it some personification and imagery, right? Kind of together. Oh, another thing that you may not even thought about, the whole thing is technically flashback.
Oh.
Right, which is a literary technique. So it's the point of view that the whole thing's in. I would say it's pretty essential to discuss the point of view, which is a literary technique as well, right? It's pretty, because I think the point of view is so important here, because to some degree we can't know exactly what their relationship was. All we can know is what Hector's perception of their relationship was, and how he viewed his cousin and how he viewed himself. So like, I think discussing that point of view perspective would be something to talk about.
So passages with like a non-third person narrator, is that like is like a narrator like as like a technique one of them a really effective one that you would prefer us to use?
I would say this. I would always at least think about the effect the narration has. Doesn't mean you have to write about it, but like it certainly should be something that you're thinking through and going, okay, if this person's saying I, me, my, right? So it's first person. They are a character, and the things that they are feeling and seeing are from their perspective. So you would want to go, is there anything that they're saying or feeling? Sorry. Hold on, music is starting. I gotta make it stop. Okay. You would want to say, like, is there any reason for me to doubt what they're feeling? Here's what I mean by that. Like, you know how people are in real life, right? You ever talk to somebody and they're like, I'm not sad right now, but like they're very clearly sad.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And they may not even be lying to you. Like, they may not even realize, like, sometimes we are not super aware of our own emotions and how we're affected by things. To some degree, I think that's what's going on with Hector here. I think Hector may not realize the degree to which he is thinking poorly of himself because of how highly he's esteeming Andre. The other thing we have to be clear about, what is probably a big reason why he's esteeming Andre so highly in his memory?
Guilt.
Yeah, because he feels guilty about killing him. So he may not have esteemed him that highly in life, but in like now that he's dead and he's looking back on it later, and that's where flashback's important, right? When we think about things like flashback, the perspective of the flashback is important. Is it a third person one where we can feel pretty confident that how it's being described is how it actually is? Or is it somebody describing their memory? Because our memories of things are almost always tainted by our bias. And so the bias that this guy's bringing into this is pretty clear guilt. So it's pretty likely that he's going to like kind of overplay, which is why I think you have some of the angelic description. The womanish face. I'm not exactly sure how I would. That's probably one that me writing about it, I would ignore it because I'm not sure what point I would want to make there. I would
Yeah.
say it's not necessarily an insult, though.
I thought it was a compliment, because
I well see, and I kind of think so too. I mean, like I said, it depends on like kind of what's the cultural thing, right? If it was like lumberjacks and it's like rough, like this is the context of it, and they're calling somebody womanish, then they would consider that an insult.
I was more
I-
so like the fact that he says like you can't see where I'm pointing, but like he was the favorite of fortune, the favorite of women, and like he always says like he's complimenting his ability with girls and stuff, right?
Right.
So I figure like if he's saying people would be infatuated with him, and then he's describing him as womanish, then I think just womanish would be a compliment. And also like I guess because at the time like this is kind of relates to Ethan's statement earlier, like the society back then was very sexist, so like women were seen as mainly for their looks and not for their capability, which is not good, but that's how it was. So like maybe complimenting his looks by saying he was very womanesque would be a compliment to his looks, because that's what they were mainly not how do I say it? That's what only guys cared about back then, and like what society expected of them.
Right. Here's the line you were talking about, right? Favorite of fortune.
Yeah,
Favorite of women. So favorite of fortune means everything goes well for him.
and when
Favorite of
right
women
after-
means that like women are attracted to him.
and see
But, like-
after where it says, oh, sorry, what?
Well, but I was gonna say this sentence is one of the sentences that really shows what I was talking about. How he looks so highly at his cousin, but then immediately tears himself down. Right? How does he
Yeah,
describe
I was about to
himself? He's nothing. He's a rough soldier. He had done his country good service, so he doesn't think he's awful and useless. He just thinks he's kind of a nobody, right?
Yeah,
But in the boudoir of I actually don't know this word. Pairboy. Oh, it was they gave you the thing. Did y'all click on it?
Yeah.
no, I didn't, because
There's the, oh yeah, because you fell asleep. But in the actual thing,
Private
I
sitting
looked
room.
it up at the time, but I forgot what it means.
It's a private sitting room in an aristocratic lady. Of an aristocratic lady.
Oh, okay. So yeah, well, I knew what boudoir was at. I did. Oh, so the paraboy. What is that word? Para bear. Parabear. I guess that's your aristocratic lady. Yeah, boudoir is like a fancy sitting room, right? But in the fancy sitting room of the aristocratic lady, he was a mannerless boor. So he's talking about himself, right? So how is he? Like he's a rough soldier. He did good service, but around women, he's a big nincompoop. Talking about himself, right? But I would venture to guess he's probably not as bad as all that.
I'm pretty sure he isn't.
Again, you would want to be careful in your language if you were making that point, because you want to be careful of like just declaring. But there's a good chance that he was decent looking and decently composed about women, and women probably looked at him finely. But if the women he wanted were all looking at his cousin, and the success he wanted was all going to his cousin, then that's what's going to cause him to think of himself in such a lowly way.
And he had, for him to be next in line for this whatever the thing that his cousin was currently at, he'd have to have some good like societal standing to where like he'd be not exactly like the same standard as his cousin, but kind of close. So he can't be like exactly poor or anything either. He's probably just,
It's just a mindset.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I was exactly going with that. I don't know. It's just another.
Yo, Mr. DeBerry, I have a question.
What's up?
So, like, when you're trying to aim for, like, more points, like, you know how, like, in certain stories, sometimes people just don't catch things, and, like, you have only such a limited time limit to write things down, you know? But, like, what if you're just trying to aim for more points, but, like, you don't want to... Are you, like, if you're trying to aim for more points, do you want to try and assume and make those types of assumptions like, oh, he killed him. Oh, they're rich and wealthy, the society. You know, you want to talk. Do you want to talk about those points rather than leave them out because you don't know?
Well, yeah, you would. Okay, so when I say certain things you don't know, I mean that he killed him, we know, right? I mean, he says it was a fatal quarrel in the first sentence, and then he gave him a fatal wound down here, so we know he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
Things we're not certain about is like whether, you know, is Hector as hopeless with the women as he makes himself out to be? We don't know that for certain, but you can still say it. You just have to be careful. Like, you just have to word it in such a way to where, like, you just basically say that.
Like it's not like concrete when you say it. Like
Yeah, just don't declare it as an absolute truth. What you declare as a truth is,
but you can like recognize it's something that's not very clear.
yeah, you can say it's clear that he thought more highly of his cousin than himself. That is clear, right? And then you can prove it right here, you know. But then you could just concede, you know, it's, you know, we can't know if his opinion of himself was wholly accurate or not. But it's very plausible that his high opinion of his cousin caused a low opinion of himself. What I just said, you can say that using
Okay.
words like plausible or likely, or things like that. You just wouldn't want to say just flat straight out, oh, he only hated himself because he cared about his cousin. Because we can't technically prove that. We could say it's likely. We could say it's possible. We could say evidence points to that direction. But you would want to be careful of just declaring it.
Okay.
The other thing, just to even address your phrase of like hunting for more points, so to speak, you don't have to notice everything. That's not really what they're looking for. So we're not trying to check box off and go, oh, this person didn't notice this, therefore they lost this point. So like, don't feel like you have to bring things up just because like, oh, I got to make sure and say this so that I get my higher points. You want to try to prove your argument with depth and complexity. So anything you bring up should be to further your actual argument you're making. The noticing as much as possible.
Oh my god. Sorry.
The noticing as much as possible is almost more along the lines of, can I get to that depth? It's more about what you're thinking through. So like the suggestions I gave you, make sure you're thinking about, how does the point of view affect this? You're thinking questions like, can I trust this information that I've been given? You're thinking things along the lines of, man, he's using a lot of imagery. What? It's all good. But what is, what's the purpose of these images? And if we talk about the purpose of the images, I think a lot of it shows us guilt, right? Like a lot of the imagery is like mood setting. So you have a lot of these like kind of almost like death imagery is almost too strong, but it's definitely when you're reading through these images, you're like, oh, this isn't like a bright summer happy day. This is a cold, dark, and it kind of matches up with the way that he feels. Thanks. They brought me my phone. That's what they were doing.
Children.
They left.
Aw.
If that one that was in there, if he came in there, he would just hide anyway. He gets super shy when I'm on this thing.
Oh, rip. One thing, I noticed this earlier, but when it says that little part in the middle of where you have the passage right now, where it's like mainly blank, the second paragraph where it says, our quarrel had been a fearful and a quarrel which could have but one result, and that the dialogue. When it says that, like, doesn't that seem like an overstatement? Because he's saying like the only way it would have ended was if he died. Like, it was the direst of like results, and that was the only way it could happen.
Well, I don't know that he's being melodramatic so much as he's saying like, we had reached a point in this argument that one of us was going to kill the other one. Especially, I mean, that seems kind of ridiculous in our society today because we don't usually have like duels to the death. But like a duel to the death was a much more normal thing in their society. So I think him saying that, yeah, we had escalated our fighting to the point that both our honor was such at stake that we couldn't walk away from this without one having killed the other.
I guess because it was technically like before he actually mentions that he died and stuff. I was thinking like he hadn't actually like he wasn't referring to the part that they were already fighting at that rate. I thought he was just expecting this will end in a death anyway. But
Well, right, but he immediately comes after that and goes,
I had struck
right?
him.
Yeah, he goes, the welt raised by my open hand was crimson upon his fair woman's face. Like,
Wait, by crimson doesn't mean blood, or is like his hand just red?
he's saying the mark from his hand, the welt on his face was red.
Okay. I don't
So
know.
there was a red welt where he had been slapped. And like that's part of the honor thing. Like you don't slap someone of the nobility in public and then like basically at the point where he slapped him across the face, it was like, well, one of them was going to have to die now.
Oof.
Again, that's a fairly foreign thing to us. We don't think about things that way.
Oh, you don't?
Especially family, right? You can have a fist fight with your cousin or brother or whatever and then be hugging each other 2 hours later. Like it's whatever. But
Oh, I thought killing everyone was normal. I guess I've been doing it wrong. That's a joke. Sorry.
I got
Bad
you.
one, but.
We're technically beyond our time. Did y'all have any final thoughts or statements?
Nah.
I had a question about my speech later, but
Oh, okay. You can just email me that. I'll go back and look at it again.
All right.
all right.
All right, we all good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, bye.
Bye, Brianna. Good luck with the dishes.
Cool.
See you guys.
See ya.